Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 43rd episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. The 1980s really gave us birth of one of the best subgenres of film, the high school teen movies. Coming of age stories with a bit of edge and realism that paralleled the real lives of a lot of high school suburban kids, offering accurate portrayals of real Americans at the time. They often explore popularity, what motivates the actions of young teens, young romance, social class, cliques, and most of all, personal growth. The 1980s was one of the most interesting times in life from an outsider looking in perspective. Being born in the 90s, I myself envy people who lived in the 80s when all I have are books, music, and of course, film as a time capsule to look at these times and try and live in them as much as possible, but it's just not the same. The hair, the clothing styles, the music, the carefree nature of life, the fun and nostalgic forms of technology and entertainment, and most important, the connected nature of humans through real interactions and not through a screen. The Brat Pack movies were some of the most popular and fun movies of the 1980s, a time in American cinema where the blockbusters, action adventures, and sci-fis ruled the box office. We had this group of high school movies that kind of started a legacy and it's transcended through the generations, where even some of these kids today are still watching them. Even though the game has changed tremendously for the kids since the 80s, the kids in school today can still find something to connect on because they still hit the same classic beats of being a teenager, even though the approach is much more different. The Outsiders, The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, and St. Elmo's Fires are some of the most popular and influential, but today we're going to talk about the Brat Pack classic, Pretty in Pink. Pretty in Pink, 1986, directed by Howard Deutsch, written by John Hughes, starring Molly Ringwald, Harry Dean Stanton, John Cryer, Annie Potts, James Spader, and Andrew McCarthy. Set in Chicago, the story follows Annie, played by Molly Ringwald, who lives with her unemployed working class father, played by Harry Dean Stanton, and spends most of her time with her friend Ducky, played by John Cryer, who is secretly in love with her. One theme that is apparent and is one of the overarching themes of the film is social class, as we see her dad doesn't have a job and she is clearly embarrassed by this and where she lives. The thing is, though, is they aren't living that bad. They have a decent sized house, they both have cars, she has a job, and they seem to be fine. I mean, they aren't living in a shelter or anything, and it's only two of them. Yet the dynamic in this film and the cool kids at the school are all rich, and they are referred to as Richies. The Richies in this movie are bullies and portrayed as scumbag, arrogant types, which, let's face it, a lot of rich kids are. But I feel like this movie makes it out to be a lot worse than it actually is. I went to school with rich kids, me being middle class, and I got along with them fine and even made friends with a few of them. I wouldn't call the main characters in this film poor by any means. More middle class. I mean, they live in the burbs of Chicago. I know for a fact that area isn't cheap to live in. And if you own a home there, you aren't doing that bad based on American standards of living. But I can't speak on the 1980s, so I'll leave it up to my imagination. While we dwell on the perfect lives of the Richies and not having a prom date, we see Andy working at the record store and she gains the interest and attraction of a Richie, Blaine, who is best friends with a super jerk Richie named Steph, whom Andy previously rejected. They talk about her job and eventually begin planning to go on a date despite the social class differences. I mean, it's so crazy. It's almost like they were interracial dating back then or something, the way their friends around them treated them for their desires. Teen love is the other central theme in this film, and forbidden love. Ducky is furious when he finds out that Andy is going on a date with a Richie, even though he couldn't muster up the courage to tell her how he feels. This man has been in the friend zone for years, and when you are a girl's friend that long, you can enter the brother category if you don't make your move soon enough. Obviously, Andy likes Blaine. He is considered handsome, rich, popular, and something that she could never have, which makes the desire even greater. Ducky is safe. goofy, dorky, rides a bike, and the total opposite of Blaine. This film shows us how popularity and status is important, even when we pretend it isn't. And whether he would ever admit it or not, Ducky is seethingly jealous of Blaine. I mean, the dude drives a BMW in high school. One thing it did get right is the jealousy. Whether people want to admit it or not, at that age, we have all been jealous of someone for one reason or another, could be bigger or smaller. High school back then was definitely like a food chain, and this film shows that, as a lot of high school films did of the time. The cliques were very set, and you could visually see in their appearance to what group they belonged to. Although Ducky packed the personality and charm, Blaine was just in the right crowd and had the popularity, and he really just couldn't compete with that. As Andy and Blaine get closer, they actually start to drift apart because of the treatment of their friends for dating outside of their social class. Andy ends up going to the prom alone, where her and Ducky reconcile, and she also makes up with Blaine. Ducky then sees that Blaine isn't like the other Richies and gives Andy his blessing to date him, as he's got a little something going on for himself with a girl. We get a typical movie ending, and Andy and Blaine kiss, thus giving us a tale where two unlikely people can be together. The end. Now, this movie is okay. It's a decent high school film. The main reason I wanted to revisit it is because I will be making the 20 greatest high school movies of all time, so I watched this for research purposes. Now, for a movie of this caliber, it works. The acting is decent. Harry Dean Stanton is probably too good to be in this movie. The story is quite simple and basic and really doesn't offer anything in the department of edge. But this movie has influenced tons of films after it. I mean, look at She's All That. Hell, it's the main basis of the spoof Not Another Teen Movie, which is hilarious. Despite its legacy, I mean, most of these characters suck, although Andy and Ducky are quite relatable. They're quite flat and really don't have anything going on beyond the surface. The way they treat social class in this movie is just crazy to me. They make the non rich kids feel like freaking wild animals, and the rich kids are like straight up royalty, but when in reality, everyone in this movie is doing just fine. I think The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles are better than this movie, and I would say it falls in the middle of the bunch of the Brat Pack films. The best one is probably The Outsiders, if we're being real. I think my main issue with this film is for a coming of age story, the characters didn't seem to have much growth from start to the finish, except for maybe Ducky. He's probably the best character in the movie. Blaine sucks, and so do all his friends, and no one on earth would ever want to hang with any of these folks. I don't care how much money you have. Despite my criticisms of the movie, it's not bad by any means, and absolutely has its moments and some charm to it. It's entertaining enough to fulfill your surface level movie needs, but nothing to marvel over. The soundtrack and the look of the characters is spot on, as this movie is a step right into an 80s time capsule. I appreciate these type of films for letting me live in their world and get a glimpse of a time that I wish I was around for. I would absolutely recommend this film to teen movie fans and high school movie fans. You'll see a lot of stuff taken from maybe some of your favorite 90s movies. So overall, I will give Pretty in Pink a 6.8 out of 10. Guys, thank you so much for watching my Pretty in Pink review. Let me know if there is a movie you'd like me to review. Make sure you like and subscribe. It helps me out. I really appreciate it. I will be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.